Battleground States finds that 1 in 3 black voters is more motivated to vote for Vice President Kamala Harris once they hear contrasting messages on climate action. The poll was conducted by Climate Power in collaboration with HIT Research, of course, led by our buddy Terrence Woodbury. They surveyed black voters in key battleground states: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Climate Power's Black Engagement Senior Advisor, Markeya Thomas, joins us right now, along with Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali, former Senior Advisor for Environmental Justice at the EPA, as well as Tamara Toles O'Laughlin, the CEO and President of the Environmental Grantmakers Association. So glad to have all three of y'all here on our climate change special. So Markeya, let's start with you. And so just give me the overview of really what y'all were able to discover, how critically important climate and the environment is to African Americans.
So the reason why we wanted to do this poll is because we wanted to be able to actually measure how climate is important to black voters, and if it's like a top voting issue for black voters, and also what messaging can move black voters in this election. And what we have found is what we have always known, that black voters care about climate. We may not always have the messaging for it, but we absolutely care about it. And some of the messaging that we've seen really resonate with black voters is how climate is directly connected with the economy and good paying jobs that don't require college degrees. Because in the state that we currently are, we care about our future and we want stability. We want to be able to clean up our communities, and we also want to be able to weather the storms.
But here's the interesting thing. I mean, look, we've had 9, 10 different black specific polls on here. We've had lots of conversations, issues folks care about. You've heard so much information about what black men want, and climate doesn't show up. Is that because of, frankly, how the questions are asked, what they determine to be the issues? Is it a question of not asking about environmental racism? Just your thoughts about that.
I think there are a few things. One of them is that people are not asking the right questions. We talk about climate as if it's like an abstract issue that doesn't impact our day-to-day. And so a lot of people aren't really sure how to measure the climate conversation, as well as I think we don't think about how like a clean energy economy is like the way of the future, because we are busting the monopoly of big oil and fossil fuels being our only source of energy. And in order to do that, we need to be able to create jobs. We're seeing that with our energy grid. We're seeing it with EVs. And I just think for the most part, people conducting these polls just don't have the language on how to ask the right questions.
Also, I'll deposit this. I also think that, frankly, on this issue, so much of this issue has been defined by the language of the right. And so many folks on the right, oh, climate hoax, this stuff is not real. Oh my goodness, you talk about the weather changing, all these different things. I mean, literally, it's late October. Here we are in, Washington, D.C., and, you've got, I'm looking here, today it was a high of 82, 78. They're already saying it's likely going to be a very warm winter, which is, in the last 2 or 3 years, has been that way. And so this idea of these people acting as if climate change isn't real is absolutely crazy. You talk about the hurricane that hit the East Coast. That was this interesting story a local station had done, how people, about 3 years ago, people had left eastern North Carolina to move to Asheville because they figured, being in the mountains of North Carolina, they were free from climate change, and then massive flooding actually happens. It was kind of like, oh my God, we actually can't escape this. And so I think that's also, it's been so politicized, and these scientists are not real, these are, that it also impacts how people sort of view these issues.
Absolutely. And it's wonky by design. Well, if we go all the way back to like Reagan, when we first started talking about climate change, similar to Trump and Vance, he was taking big oil money. Like everyone has an agenda to push, and so they make climate change really, really wonky. Also, I think people just don't know the difference between weather and climate. Like weather is day to day. Climate is like how weather, like the period of weather over 30-year increments, which is how we know that the Earth is warming, because period by period we are seeing those temperatures rise, which then disrupts the atmosphere and is causing all of this extreme weather, from heat waves to extreme storms to like even how, previously when we thought about hurricanes, it's like, okay, as soon as they make landfall, they're going to slow down and just dissipate. Now we are seeing that slow moving storms have the power to dump more water, which, like you mentioned, is like devastating folks who like moved to different areas to be able to protect themselves from rising seas and the things that we are seeing from climate change.
And of course, for me, being a native of Houston, look, I've been living with hurricanes my entire life. You prefer a fast-moving hurricane as opposed to a slow-moving one, because you're right. When you're dumping that amount of water, it completely overwhelms systems. And then even back-to-back, frankly, the Earth can't absorb those back-to-back storms, and now it just wreaks even more havoc. I want to bring in Mustafa in this conversation as well, because Mustafa, again, I do believe language matters, semantics matters. And so when you're hearing environment, climate, weather, environmental racism, what I try to do is, and what I do is try to simplify this as much as possible and explain to people, do you care about what's in your food? Do you care about the air you breathe? Do you care about the water that you drink? Do understand your entire existence is dependent upon what's in the air and what's in the ground.
Exactly. And you hit it right on the head. It is about food. It is about health. It is about jobs. We know that those are three issues that even in this particular moment, folks care about, no matter what color they are right now. They actually care about those. But for our communities, it's critically important for us to be able to help them to understand that when we see these prices for food going up, there is a connection also to both the climate crisis and injustices about where and how people can grow food. Can we grow food in our backyards like our grandparents used to do? Or do we now live in communities, these sacrifice zones, that have toxic pollution that are there? When we look at the health impacts that are happening inside of our communities, we got to make sure that we're having the environmental justice conversation with the climate crisis conversation, because so many people now know, individuals who have asthma, or maybe their baby girl or their son has asthma, and then we make those linkages that are there about the fossil fuels and the air pollution that people are breathing. And then we help people to understand that that same pollution that is making Black folks sick and shortening our lives is that same pollution that is also playing a role in driving the climate crisis. And then, of course, the other part is people always want to know, if you're talking about this new clean economy, not only can I get a job in this space, but can I be a boss? Can I be a boss? Can I own my own business in this space? So when I'm having these conversations with folks, I'm bringing all the things that are actually playing out in their lives on a daily a daily type of situation, and helping them to understand where resources are, who are people who look like them, or helping to create these new businesses and make change, and what the future can actually look like for our communities.
Tamara, I think that when we talk about the jobs aspect of this is what I think is the fundamental problem in the United States. We actually prefer stuff to reach catastrophic points before we go, okay, fine, maybe we ought to fix this thing. Because we are so economically driven in this country, and we just got to just go ahead and be clear about this. This is a capitalistic society. It is about how can I make as much money as possible and keep as much money as possible and to become rich. So what we then do is we say, oh no, you hear Donald Trump, oh, the Green New Deal, it's gonna cost too much. It's gonna just too much money. We don't have enough the electric grid. We don't have enough power stations, and we need more gas and oil and drill, baby, drill. That's just literally how we think, and you're seeing what's happening. But the problem is, all you hear is, oh, this is too costly, as if there's not an actual cost to what has happened with the climate in this country and in this world.
Yeah, so it isn't just that there's a lie that it doesn't cost money. The idea that doing everything, like the Green New Deal is an umbrella, it's a concept. It talks about paying for jobs, making sure people have health care, and that there is energy. Guess what? We pay for those things anyway. So there really is no differential between whether or not we do something about it, whether we're consumers or whether we are people who own our own capacity. we're going to put money in, we're putting labor, we're putting in our sweat, and when we live and die, other people make money off of it. So there is no too expensive to grow into what's better for our people, because we pay on either end, especially when we're not in charge of what we're discussing. So there is no financial argument to continue polluting unless you're someone who sells oil and gas. To everybody else, it's cheaper to get clean.
Well, but here's, I think, what's crazy, Markeya. It's already costing us. You literally have insurance companies not wanting to do business in Florida, flood insurance, other types of insurance. We're seeing this. So this notion that, oh, we can't afford it, guess what? Regular, ordinary people can't afford it. I had somebody hit me, and this woman, she says, well, I don't understand, people, why aren't they leaving? I said, okay, as somebody who's actually had to flee, had to evacuate before because of a hurricane, I said, let me just walk you through basic cost. If you have to pack up and leave, first of all, you got to have a car. What if you're low income, working poor, you use public transportation. Now you can't leave. 2, if you go somewhere, you have to think you're going to be gone at a minimum for a week. Okay. Hotel's gonna be $200, maybe cheaper, but let's just say $200. Okay, you throw in taxes, you're gonna have to spend possibly $1,200 to $1,500 for a room. Now you gotta eat. Now you got kids. I said, so that's anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 you're going to need to be able to leave for that week. How many people actually have an extra $2,000 to $4,000 to leave? They don't. That's a real cost when a natural disaster is on its way, which is why a lot of people stay, because they actually can't afford to leave. And so when you start seeing more of these weather-driven circumstances, that is a cost. There's a human cost, a financial cost right now.
And the thing is, we shouldn't have to leave. Like, we did not create this problem. And so we should not be on the hook for it. And even outside of just fleeing, we've seen big oil companies pass along the cost for like repairing grids and like the cost to rebuild communities onto the people that live there, as if we were the people that started this problem and as if we are fueling this problem, when essentially we just want to be able to live our lives in our communities and like live in communities that also are safe from environmental harm.
I want to go back to the poll that y'all released. You really see the movement when it comes to voters. You really see that movement among 18 to 34. That really jumps out. But what also I think is interesting, where y'all said that when it comes to following proper messaging, strong motivation, vote motivation increases by 6 points. A third of Black battleground voters 18 to 34 feel more motivated by the end of the poll. But what jumped out at me when it says, go to my iPad, 1 in 4 battleground voters feel more motivated. These voters tend to be Black voters 1849, particularly Black voters 1834, and Black men. Why specifically Black men? Just curious.
I think specifically because Black men tend to be like the movable middle. These are the people that are like really focused on providing for their families and their communities. And so what they are most interested in is the economy. So when we present this messaging of good paying jobs that don't require college degrees, people can see themselves in this future where they are able to provide for their families without working multiple jobs. And I think that's why we're seeing the most movement amongst Black men. But another thing is like amongst young voters and also women voters, the idea of a future that our children can thrive in also does really well.
Tamara, I think you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I mean, I always do. I think, why are we focused on Black men? Because the Black vote is the vote that makes the elections happen. And the Black man is a part of the community, the leader of the family. And so, frankly, the idea that whether Black men are being persecuted, somebody's getting paid on that, if people are being put in under the jail, Black men are are being targeted for that costs people and it costs the culture. If Black men are put on a track for success or failure, somebody in America is making money on it. So it's not just that we're the movable middle, it's that we are the people who move things in this country. There have never been an election that has been won without the Black vote. And so by separating us by gender, organizing us by race, figuring out how to break apart the Black family, there's a lot of money to be made, a lot of votes to be moved. And so, frankly, the idea that Black men are responsive to knowing that there will be jobs in an environment where they don't have to take jobs that kill them is pretty straightforward.
Mustafa?
Yeah, no, everything that folks said. I think the other part of it, too, especially when you look at that particular age range, is that individuals have grown up seeing everything from Hurricane Katrina to Hurricane Harvey to Maria. They've seen the lead crises that we have in Flint, Michigan, and in Jackson, Mississippi. So folks are paying much more attention to these impacts that are happening inside of our communities. And then as the sisters have shared on the flip side, they also are now paying attention to these opportunities because, yeah, there are, now over 300,000 new clean energy jobs that are out there. But people also who want to be entrepreneurs have an opportunity around contracting and subcontracting and be able to create their own businesses, to be able to take care of their families, to be able to address the wealth gap that exists inside of our communities. So it is an exciting time. And that's why we have to take a serious look at both of the people who are running and ask the question, who truly cares about our community, improving our health, and who truly has a track record of also creating economic opportunities for us to move into the space? Because we know when we come into a space, our Black genius then takes over and we take it to a whole nother level.
Markeya, when I look at, again, when I look at this poll, go to my iPad, y'all have it here. Target the right audience with the right message. Create a message testing study to identify the most impactful messaging to the right audience around Harris's vision for climate and clean energy, as well as going on offense against Trump. Has that been happening?
It has been happening. I think it's really important to focus on contrast messaging and also making the argument clear and pointing out the dangers of Project 2025. Not only does it threaten the National Weather Service, but it's going to put basic needs behind paywalls, which makes recovery from extreme weather even more difficult, as well as like things that will impact our everyday lives, from like healthcare to childcare to like our access to food, as Mustafa has talked about earlier and how important this is. And so Project 2025 literally threatens our livelihood, and our lives are on line with this election.
I'm seeing here, go back to my iPad here, Mustafa. It says Trump gets the most trust from Black voters on economic issues like jobs and cost of living. So emphasizing Harris's commitment to create new, good-paying, clean energy jobs, lowering costs, and creating pathways to the middle class is an opportunity to build trust on the economy. How would you assess it thus far, 14 days out?
Yeah, well, again, that's why this show is so important, because we get to help people to have an understanding of what's really going on here. So we know with Project 2025, which is linked to Trump, let's not, fool ourselves that he and others have not played a significant role there. We know that there's 1.7 million jobs that will be lost. Let me say that again, 1.7 million jobs lost. So that tells me right there that you are not an economic genius if we are going to actually lose the new jobs that are being created in this clean energy space. The other part that's important is that you always hear people talking about my energy bills are too high. We know from studies that it's shown that about $32 billion in increases will be a part of our energy bills if we allow Project 2025 to move forward. So all of that, Trump has to carry. You can't get away from it. The numbers are the numbers. On the other side of the equation, we know that the Harris administration has actually been focused on both creating jobs under Biden-Harris, and she's also focused on creating additional clean energy jobs. And also studies have shown that they will actually decrease our energy costs by $38 billion. So for everybody who's out there, whether you're standing on the corner, you're in the barber shop, you're in the library, wherever you're at, if somebody tells you that you're going to lose over 1 million jobs here, and the other person is actually creating jobs and has a track record on it, and then the other side of the equation, once again, is saying that they are going to increase your energy costs. So if there's anybody out there who's actually cool with your energy bills going up, then you know the administration that you should go for. But if you want your bills to actually go down, your energy costs to go down, then you have an administration on the Harris side who has a track record and who also has a plan moving forward.
Going back, Tamara, to the 1834, Go back to my iPad. It says black voters 1834 need to hear about the threat Trump poses to climate progress and their futures, especially when it comes to Project 2025 and his tax breaks for big oil. Listen, he had a meeting with big oil where he essentially said to them, y'all fund my campaign, I'm gonna let y'all do whatever the hell y'all want. People need to understand that's gonna happen.
It's already happening. That meeting is ongoing right now while the rest of the world is gathering and trying to figure out how to save the last bird, the last dog, the last fruit or vegetable that they enjoy. There are people making decisions right now to figure out just how little of your life you will get to enjoy. So it's pretty clear when you look at the options on the table who is for the Black community. Not just because they happen to identify with us, but because, frankly, the other side is just trying to get paid and then get gone. And so casting your lot with folks who are focused on making sure that they keep the status quo that keeps us undernourished, underserved, unhoused, and unapologetically ignored when it's time to count after the votes are counted. It's really clear that going backwards is not the way that we can to move forward. It's not surprising that people are recognizing that the promise of new jobs and the opportunity to live to fight another day is more appealing. Basically, the idea that FEMA's not going to show up when your house gets flooded, nor is it going to show up if your crops get burnt. It's the police are not going to show up to support you because they're not going to be resourced in ways that allow them to do anything other than spray you with bullets. Like, we are in a very real set of challenges that are not going to get better if you vote with the folks who just want your face in the front of the camera, as opposed to your voice and the politic that determines your future. And so Project 2025 is just one part of how we will fail to meet the mandate and continue to support people who want to kill us. So the choices are clear.
But Markeya, you do have to deal with the reality of politics. You look at the issue of fracking in Pennsylvania. 2019, then Senator Kamala Harris was against fracking. She's now moderated her position. For Pennsylvania, that's a huge issue. And so part of this issue, frankly, when it comes to politics, is it's a dance you play. Because one state, there may be an issue like fracking that is huge in a Pennsylvania, but in another state, it's irrelevant. And so when you start talking about battleground states, again, I mean, I can think about NAFTA. NAFTA, was huge for Trump in Ohio because a lot of those folks said, they lost their jobs. But the folks in Texas were like, it was cool with us. And so let's talk about that, because that's the dance that, frankly, she has to play, because you have to play electoral politics based upon that one thing, jobs.
Yes. And also what we're seeing about the fracking conversation is that it really is not as important as people make it to be. We know that Pennsylvania is really big on fracking, but we also know that Pennsylvania is looking forward to change, looking forward to having jobs that don't sacrifice the lives of people living there. And although it's still a big issue right now, I would argue that as we continue to invest in the clean energy economy, it will become less and less of an issue.
I'm sorry, Tamara, go ahead.
Just to push back even further, some of the biggest investments for clean energy have come out of Pennsylvania. Folks who have had their water poisoned, their air poisoned. Pennsylvania is also the only state that has an amendment in the Constitution to protect your right to have clean air and an environment that you can live in. You know where that came from? People who got tired of losing their family members to industry, oil, air pollution, and all of the above combining to be an industry that clouds out your voice. So for the folks who are loud and proud on all of those issues, there are many folks lining up to fight at the front lines coming from Pennsylvania against all of it. So it's not a closed book. Philanthropy has really shown up to make the point that fracking isn't just bad for the people who are nebulizer the emissions. It's bad for the people who have to live in the shadow of what is done to the soil, the air, and the water that they need to live. And those people are poor, all of them.
But right there, Mustafa, it's trying to reach those low-income, poor workers and then translate those issues to voting. Reverend William Barber talks about this here, and so it's the economic piece. And so how do you do that, especially when you're talking about poor, low-income, working-class, white voters who Republicans are appealing to on culture issues as opposed to economic and health and environmental issues?
Well, because we know that the economics and the jobs is so critically important, we bring forward the stories and examples of folks who look just like the people who are being impacted and help them to understand, the folks have been able to create these new sets of businesses and then create a new sets of jobs in both wind and solar and thermal and a number of the other industries that are a part of this. Because people need to see themselves represented. People need to see their reflection in folks who have been able to navigate this. And often that's not being done enough. And that's why, the work that Tamara does and others and funding, on the ground work is so incredibly important, because then people get a chance to see this is not just theory. This is, actually people are putting it all together, and they're being able to create not only a pathway forward, but they're being able to make sure that people have, this livable wage that folks often talk about. But it's far beyond that, because as was shared earlier, even if you don't have a college degree, you can enter into these spaces because you work great with both your hands and your mind. And that's what the people, I come from these communities. I come from Appalachia, so I've done lots of work in Pennsylvania and Ohio and other areas. And that's what people are looking for. They want not just hope, they want a pathway forward, but they want to be able to see that it's real, that the resources are there, and that there's a place for them.
Well, absolutely, absolutely. Markeya, I know you're going to be leaving us. Give us your final thoughts regarding this poll.
Yes, so this poll is super close to me because as a Black person who has worked in climate for a long period of time, I see how it impacts our day-to-day. And it's very important for us to really be able to be future forward, looking at clean energy economy, making sure we can clean up our communities and build resilient communities to be able to weather the storms. Because as we spoke about earlier, fleeing is not always an option, and it should not be. And so I think that the future is bright with this, because we know Black voters win elections. And what we're seeing from this poll is that Black voters move anywhere between 6 and 11 points, which is the largest number. And so I believe that with this messaging, we can win this thing.
If folks want to get more information and see the results of the poll, where should they go?
They should go to climatepower.com and then click on the research and polling tab. And we have all of our polls there, but if you type in Black, then you will get all of the polling results, specifically for Black people and Black communities.
All right, Markeya Thomas, we certainly appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Folks, going to go to break. We come back. We're going to talk more about climate crisis we're facing in the country. And remember, we were in North Carolina a couple of years ago. Do y'all realize that North Carolina is the home of the environmental racism movement, the environmental justice movement? Yeah, we'll talk about that as well. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered, the Black Star Network, this special edition of our show focusing on the climate crisis specific to Black America. Back in a moment.
IVF is a miracle for us because it allowed us to have our family. After having my daughter, I wanted more children, but my embryo transfer was canceled 8 days before the procedure. Donald Trump overturning Roe v. Wade stopped us from growing the family that we wanted. I don't want politicians telling me how or when I can have a baby. We need a president that will protect our rights, and that's Kamala Harris.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Bob and I both voted for Donald Trump.
I voted for him twice. I won't vote for him again. January 6th was a wake-up call for me.
Donald Trump divides people. We've already seen what he has to bring.
He didn't do anything to help us. Kamala Harris, she cares about the American people. I think she's got the wherewithal to make a difference. I've never voted for a Democrat.
Yes, we're both lifelong Republicans.
The choice is very simple.
I'm voting for Kamala.
I am voting for Kamala Harris.
In 2016, Donald Trump said he would choose only the best people to work in his White House. Now those people have a warning for America. Trump is not fit to be president again. Here's his vice president.
Anyone who puts himself over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. It should come as no surprise that I will not be endorsing Donald Trump this year.
His defense secretary.
Do you think Trump can be trusted with the nation's secrets ever again?
No. I mean, it's just irresponsible action that places our service members at risk, places our nation's security at risk.
His national security advisor.
Donald Trump will cause a lot of damage. The only thing he cares about is Donald Trump.
And the nation's highest-ranking military officer.
We don't take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or a dictator. And we don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator.
Take it from the people who knew him best. Donald Trump is a danger to our troops and our democracy. We can't let him lead our country again.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Me, Sherry Shepard, and you know what you're watching, Roland Martin, Unfiltered.
Well, if you want to believe or you want to know what Donald Trump actually feels about the issue of climate change and the environment, all you got to do is listen to what he actually has to say. Check this out.
Now we call it. Do you ever notice this was such a big deal, the environmental stuff? I haven't heard the environmental stuff mentioned in 6 months. I was saying the other night, what the hell happened to the environment? David, will you figure this out? David McCormick, everybody vote for him. David, will you figure this out? You know? No, but think about this. I haven't heard, Mike, they don't ever talk about the environment anymore. You know why? Mike is saying, don't talk about it now. No, it's one of the great scams of all time. You know why they don't talk about it? Because people aren't buying it anymore. I don't want to use bad language. My wife said, please don't use bad language.
Thinks it is a scam. That's out of his own mouth. So folk need to be very aware of that. But here's the other piece. When you talk about Project 2025 and what that will do to the issue of the environment and climate, this is what ProPublica, when they got some videos of some of the folks with Project 2025. Listen to this.
What do you think about all of about the left's words and definitions in the environment?
It's a great point, Katie. They don't stop. Climate change, allegedly, is everywhere. And if the American people elect a conservative president, his administration will have to eradicate climate change references from absolutely everywhere. And according to our intelligence community, the #1 threat facing our country today is, drumroll, climate change. Not Russia, not China, not AI, climate change. This shows how the federal government is all in on this issue. And climate change activists wield a lot of power. This is an issue to pay attention to as it has infiltrated every part of the federal government. Now, when I think of climate change, I immediately think of population control, don't you? I think about the people who don't want you to have children because of the impact on the environment. Perhaps not everyone will make that connection, but after spending time in the international space trying to protect life, I can tell you that this is part of their ultimate goal, to control people.
What do you think I'm sorry. Mustafa, what the hell are they talking about?
Well, they have no idea what they're talking about.
Like, I don't know what the hell that. We were from climate to population control?
Well, if they had their information correct, Roland, they would understand that there are younger people who feel that folks are not serious about addressing the climate crisis. So some of them have said that they don't want to have children and have their children have to go through what we know is going to come from the climate crisis. But besides that, here's where they're also incorrect. So if the intelligence community, whose job is to be able to understand where the greatest sets of impacts are coming from and also predict what the future is going to look like so they can do the risk management that's necessary. One side. The other side of the equation that she didn't say is that the military has also said that climate change is one of the greatest threats because many of our military bases are, on areas that are close to water bodies. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is that they're not coming from a scientific perspective or from somebody who just goes outside on their back porch and sees the changes that are currently going on. So their whole goal is to be able to strip the language of climate out of the federal government, which will then make sure that there's no resources that are garnered for it. And for the Black community, that means that we are going to continue to have all of these additional health burdens and shortening of our lives because we did not address, what we could have done if we had a president who actually cared. Here's the other part that they didn't say. Is that if this stuff is not real, why did the Trump administration take over 125 actions to weaken or to eliminate protecting clean air and clean water and the land and addressing the climate crisis? So if it's not a real thing, they wouldn't have needed to do any of that. And then, of course, the Biden-Harris administration had over 300 policies in place, and there still needed to be more to address the issues. And I know my dear sister will unpack that.
Go right ahead, because I still have no idea what the hell the two white women were talking about.
So my grandma said you can't wrestle with crazy. But what I'll say is Project 2025 is just an amalgam of a bunch of things that are set to trigger you. If you want to go to places where doctors can't serve you, have your energy cost more so that you have to decide whether you will eat or have power, have food that is more likely to poison you than feed you, and have nothing but chemicals pouring over your life, your body, your children, and the potential of whether you would ever have children, then Project 2025 is for you. Because it's full of politics, nonsense, word salad, and crazy talk, which puts you into conversations like the one we just had to sit through, where we have to watch someone talking about population control. You know who cares about population control? People who look at data and don't care about people. We are not in a conversation that is just about data. We're in a conversation about floods and fire and damage and the cost of electricity and the quality of your life being shut down and your children not having access to the basic things you have counted on because the planet doesn't sustain us. That's not somebody else's business. We know what population control is. It is a boogeyman that allows people to try out the things that are scariest to you at moments when they think if you just keep doing the same thing, they're going to be all right at your expense. So I'm not going to wrestle with crazy and what was going on between those two women, because what they were doing was getting paid a lot of money to confuse people, to muddy the situation, and to make it seem as though people were going to take something, especially from Black people for whom everything has already been taken. Like what we're in this contest, this political context about is what we're going to get out of it. And what we need to get out of it is a future where we have dignity, where we have rights, we have security, and we don't have to listen to people talk in circles to us as though we're not in the conversation already.
Things have actually been done in the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed by the Biden-Harris administration. And actually, it was Vice President Kamala Harris who actually cast that tie-breaking vote. We're talking about some $270 billion. This right here is a fact sheet a member of Congress put out talking about extending and expanding clean energy tax credits, new investment tax credit, dealing with energy storage, microgrid technology, also new direct pay for nonprofits and others when it comes to clean energy credits, bonuses for high road labor standards and key clean energy and clean vehicle tax provisions, new incentive to keep existing nuclear energy power plants online, $27 billion for the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund for nonprofit, state, and local climate finance institutions that will finance the rapid deployment of zero-emission technologies and other things as well. And the thing here, Mustafa, that I think we have to just acknowledge is, again, it's frankly how ass backwards we were. I mean, listen, if we go back to when Jimmy Carter was in the White House, okay? Mm-hmm. Carter installed solar panels on the roof of the White House, and they mocked him. Republicans mocked him. One of the first things that Reagan did was remove the solar panels from the White House. Imagine if in this country we actually cared then, how far ahead we would be today. And when I'm listening to J.D. Vance and Trump complain about, how we're behind China when it comes to, solar panels, that's your party. Y'all screwed that up. Solar technology is an American invention. Yes. But because Republicans poo-pawed it and crapped all over it, that's what led to China leading on it. That was an American technology, and had Republicans not trashed it, we would be so much further along in 2024.
We most definitely would. China was like, oh, you don't want it? We'll take it. And now they have this huge industry that's there. That's not to say that we don't also have a footprint there, but you've got to have, administration after administration that continues to make investments in that space. That's why the CHIPS Act also is so incredibly important, because there's sets of dollars that are there to help us on the technology side of addressing what's going on in relationship to the climate crisis. And the other part of it is, as my dear sister, shared earlier, is that we also would have saved millions of lives, because we know that in our communities and in other vulnerable communities, when we're breathing in all of this toxic air pollution that comes out of the tailpipes of cars and coming out of factories and coming from a number of other places, that, if we had begun to move earlier into a cleaner economy, we would have saved those lives. We would have also helped people to keep more dollars in their pocket, because they wouldn't have had to, go to the doctor all the time because of all these breathing difficulties and the liver and kidney diseases and the cancers. People are always like, well, why is cancer, eating up certain communities? You got to take a look at the toxic food that people are eating. And when I say toxic, I'm not just talking about food deserts. I'm also talking about the chemicals that are in there, but also what's in our air and what's in our water. So when Jimmy Carter was trying to get us to actually think critically about the 21st century and the sets of opportunities that would be there, and then you saw Ronald Reagan come in and take us backwards in time, they put people's lives in danger, and they also, impacted us on the economic side of the equation in a very significant way. But we can right the ship in that the past administration, the Biden-Harris administration, has actually been making those investments, both in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the climate bill, the CHIPS Act, to move us forward. But we have to make sure that there's real intentionality, and that the Black community is also benefiting from these huge sets of opportunities that are out there.
Tamara, this is a video that the White House put out in 2022, saying in 2022 there were 240 guys. Come on, switch. There were 240 million solar panels in the United States in 8 years. So by 2029, there will be nearly 1 billion solar panels in the United States. That's because of that investment. That's a perfect example of one facet of the attack dealing with climate crisis by not having us be so dependent upon oil, gas, coal, and utilizing what is always there, the sun.
That's right. The sun's always going to shine. The wind's always going to blow. Why shouldn't we be making it work for us? I have a colleague who I don't like that much, but she says it all the time, and it's absolutely
You don't like her?
I just want to put that out there. She knows who she is. I think it's important to flag that, like, the we is important here. We didn't take the solar panels off the White House. We didn't put them back on, and we haven't been a part of this conversation because we've been excluded from it. This is a unique opportunity. What the IRA did was put a lot of money on the boulevard, not on the street, on the boulevard, so that we could incentivize all the other things that make it possible for us to become owners, to get in the conversation about what we're going to do, to have choice in the conversation. That doesn't mean there's fights that are over, but the idea that we can reclaim some of what's been lost because we weren't invited into those conversations, even though we've been on that clean energy game. Like Madam C.J. Walker had an electric car in 1910. Wow. 1910. The first Black millionaire had an electric car.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Why?
Really?
She did. Yes. Do you know why? Because they marketed it to rich people, including rich Black people, that it was a clean car. You didn't have to get your hands dirty. So we have been in this conversation every time we've ever had a moment, some space, some resources, or some relief from other folks helping making decisions on our behalf. We have been in this conversation, and the 3 or 4 times we've tried to have it, it's been pulled back by industry that has its grip on the politics, its dirty, oily hands on the way that we talk about what we need and who the we is. Frankly, it's so cheap to buy a vote these days that by proxy, if you can just spill enough oil and gas in a place to move people out of where they belong or gerrymander them out of their vote, it's why climate is at the center of the things we have to do as Black people, because our future is in it, our self-sufficiency is in it, our self-determination is in it, and we've been here forever.
You just said something that I think is, and I really try my best to avoid having to hear Donald Trump's voice. But I really do need people who've yet to vote to understand how stupid of a person we are dealing with. I need people to realize that this man is not bright when we are talking about wind, okay? I'm about to play for y'all 3 clips. And everybody, y'all, this is not AI. This is not created. This is literally coming from the mouth of an imbecile. Listen.
You know this. Do you know we need twice as much electricity as we currently have in our country for AI, but the environmentalists won't let you produce it? They want wind. The wind is blowing today. The whole thing, it's the most expensive hoax in the world. The wind, it kills our birds.
Okay, I'm gonna play another one.
To keep from crying.
I'm gonna play another one. Here we go. Roll it.
Instead of playing this game with wind that is ruining everything, killing all your birds, destroying the fields, all these gorgeous fields, you got windmills all over the place, and you have birds. You want to see a bird cemetery? Just go under a windmill. You see thousands of birds dead. The bald eagle, if you kill an eagle, they put you in jail for years. And yet these windmills knock them out like nothing, and nothing happens to the people. Now, it's great to be back.
I don't. Okay, I gotta play one more, y'all, because this is really a strange one. Go. Hold 1 second, because when I saw this one, y'all, I said this man needs to be in an insane asylum. He don't need to be nowhere near, let me find it, because he was talking about TV. Okay, hold up. Let me play this one. Watch this.
We'll have an economy based on wind. I never understood wind. You know, I know windmills very much. I've studied it better than anybody. I know it's very expensive. They're made in China and Germany mostly. Very few made here, almost none. But they're manufactured tremendous, if you're into this, tremendous fumes, gases are spewing into the atmosphere. You know, we have a world, right? So the world is tiny compared to the universe. So tremendous amount of fumes and everything. You talk about the carbon footprint, fumes are spewing into the air, right?
So, one of y'all want to take that?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll just buy my brother some time and say that one of the biggest market programs for how we get people to pay for all this pollution that's floating around in the wind was developed by Republicans. Just want to put that out there. Climate is not political. There are trees everywhere, or they need to be where they are. There is sun everywhere. There is wind everywhere. There is water everywhere. There is food that we gather from the earth. There is nothing political about climate. The foolishness that comes out of these political contests makes it seem as though you can be for this and not for that. No one can drink water that's poisoned. No one can eat fish that are full of toxins. No one's kids will be okay if you have a gas stove and it puts a gas into the air and slowly makes it impossible for them to catch a breath and they get asthma. That is not up for votes. But what is up for votes is whether or not people are going to lie to you about those things being true. And so this nonsense and this rhetoric, the reason it's exhausting is because it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to make any sense. They're supposed to pull you into a rabbit hole full of crazy that makes you just do whatever they want you to do so they'll go away.
I gotta play this with him, Mustafa, before you comment, because I mean, this is like the dumb man greatest hits on Wind. Check this one out, y'all.
Much better the second time than we did the first time. Much, much better by many millions of votes. But we're running, and I tell the little, it's sad, it's a joke, but it's not a joke. Darling, I'd like to watch the president tonight on television. No, you can't. The wind isn't blowing, right? The wind isn't blowing. There's no television tonight, darling.
We're not.
I mean, it's sad. It's sad. One, it shows that he doesn't read. You know, in his previous administration, people used to always talk about how he didn't read his briefings, those types of things. If you spent a half an hour, you could have some of the basics that you need to know about what's going on, who's actually benefiting. So maybe they couldn't watch the TV because they were in Texas and because the grid, which has not been upgraded,
That's right.
and because they also didn't move forward on making sure that they had renewable energy as a part of that, maybe that's why I couldn't watch. When he talks about windmills, you know, windmills are not out there killing massive amounts of birds. He should have a conversation about the pollution that's coming out of stacks. That is not only killing birds, but killing other wildlife. That is also impacting our environment. That's killing Black and brown people. If he was serious when he was in Pennsylvania, he would have went over to where Zulene Mayfield used to be, over in Chester, Pennsylvania, and had conversations with folks there. Or if he was going to be in Philly, he could have slid right over on the west side of Philly and found out about all the people who've been exposed. Or he could have went to Institute, West Virginia. Or he could go to the Manchester community in Houston, Texas. Or he could go to Cancer Alley between New Orleans and Baton Rouge and see, when we're moving all of those fossil fuels down to be refined, what the impact looks like in vulnerable communities. And then maybe he would actually have a moment of humanity and say, we need to be moving toward cleaner types of energy. So not only are folks not dying from the initial sets of impacts that are coming out of the stacks, but also because this is the same stuff, the carbon and methane that's heating up our oceans and our atmosphere, and are causing these storms like Hurricane Helene. So he has an opportunity to actually be more well-versed, but unfortunately he is either, and I try to be a respectful person, but I just got to keep it real. He is either an imbecile, or he is somebody who is consciously putting people's lives in danger. Last point. If he actually really was somebody who knew economics, he would understand who's making some of the greatest investments in wind. And if you go and look at Texas or in Oklahoma, and then you follow the money back to the people who are actually investing in that space, there's a whole bunch of Republicans who are saying, when the cameras are on, this is a terrible thing. This is a climate hoax. And then on the other side, they're taking the money that they're getting and putting it in their back pocket because they understand that people have to move toward a new clean economy or we won't have a livable planet. And we know the first people and the worst hit impacts are going to be for Black and brown folks.
I think imbecile is it. I just can't. I can't think of anything else. I mean, you're not dealing with a serious person. And again, what Project 2025 wants to do, they want to gut everything. If people thought they attacked the EPA when he was there the first time, they want to completely obliterate the EPA. They don't give a damn about America's national treasures. They don't care about national parks. They want to drill everywhere. They do not care. They will literally rape and pillage the land in this country to satisfy big oil.
And then some.
Yeah. And we talked about the huge tax breaks that he plans on giving. I think the last number I saw was $110 billion in tax breaks that he wants to give to big oil. So, you know, you got to understand that big oil, you know, we know the impacts personally that have happened inside of our communities. We know how they tried to muddy up the science. When scientists finally said X is going to happen, how they tried to discredit them. We know the history going back over 50 years of some of the big oil companies hiding facts and then manipulating facts. So we know their track record. I believe everybody can evolve if they want to, but all we know is what we've been able to see, and that they have done everything to prop up these politicians to put forward, legislation or to weaken legislation that has huge impacts inside of our communities. They also understand that when you've got 2.4 million miles of fossil fuel pipeline in this country, enough to go to the moon and back a number of times, that they're going to continue to fill those pipelines. And what they fill it with, in many instances, is death or sickness for our community. So they're very clear. There's much intentionality in what's currently going on. And that's why when you look at Project 2025, I resigned last time. I was the highest ranking federal official, the first one to actually say, you know what, I'm not supporting this. But now they've gotten much, much smarter. So people often see all the jobs that they're going to eliminate, the language that you can't use, the manipulation of science to not tell people the truth about the impacts that are going on. But what folks don't talk about with Project 2025 is that also when you bring in all these Trump sycophants, then you're also going to have individuals who are making decisions about where the grants are going to go and what the grants actually look like that have played a traditional role in helping communities to build capacity, to have a better understanding of what's going on. They're also going to make sure that those advisory committees that have played such a critical role in bringing forward, both the amazing work that folks have been able to do, but the sets of challenges that are still going on, they will also have control over that. So there's all these things that go on inside of these federal agencies and departments that people haven't really thought about in relationship to Project 2025. And what it really does is it places a crosshair on so many communities across our country, both Black and brown and indigenous and Asian and Pacific Islander and lower wealth white communities. We have to make sure that people understand how significant this manifesto is and doing nothing to improve your life, but everything in placing additional challenges on shortening your life.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can I add to it that I don't know that they've necessarily gotten smarter, but they have gotten organized. So what my brother is talking about is the fact that there are a bunch of folks who look like you, who moved into this political moment from lots of places, so that in this moment, resources that were moving towards you will get closer to where you live, will set in motion industry and capacity where your voice is welcome. What's on the other side of that is that the watchdogs that are from your community that have been keeping everybody honest in this moment will be removed. They'll be replaced by folks who will do whatever the check tells them to do, and that check tells them to erase the Black community. We are in a fight for our lives like we've always been in the election that we have been waiting for 405 years. The question is not what's on the ballot, it's what about your life is not on the ballot. And so Project 2025 is the biggest organization of all the ideas that could be put up at this moment to make your life harder, more expensive, and more painful, more likely to lead to an untimely death. So we are not talking about if this, then that, maybe this will get something. There are no political bargains to be made in this moment. What we are doing now is talking about what we will get if we vote in one direction versus another, and the choices are life and death, frankly.
And I do want to, before I go to a break, I want to point this out. For only the second time in its 179-year history, the Scientific American has endorsed someone for president. They offered their endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris. Come on, guys. Yeah, come on.
You got to believe in science to be supported by scientists.
So
there's that.
Right. And so they say right here, Kamala Harris has plans to improve health, boost the economy, and mitigate climate change. Donald Trump has threats and a dangerous record. You can go to scientificamerican.com to actually see their endorsement.
And what's underneath that for Black people is that, frankly, the democracy doesn't end when you cast your vote. So between the choices, the likelihood that you will have a chance to fight for what you need increases in one direction and decreases in the other.
Quick break. We come back, folks. You may not realize that, but it was in North Carolina where Black folk created what is known as the Environmental Justice Movement. We'll show you a little bit of the EPA leader, Michael Regan, speaking on that at an event in North Carolina in the Black Star Network. We were there covering it. We'll be right back on Roland Martin Unfiltered, special edition of our climate crisis and its impact on Black America. Back in a moment.
Disastrous, alarming, a plan that shreds American values. That's what independent news sources and conservatives are saying about a proposal from right-wing extremists called Project 2025. It would threaten hundreds of thousands of jobs created by the Clean Energy Plan, give massive tax breaks to big oil, and roll back protections that keep corporations from poisoning our water with toxic chemicals. Project 2025, a dream for them, a disaster for you.
In 2016, Donald Trump said he would choose only the best people to work in his White House. Now those people have a warning for America. Trump is not fit to be president again. Here's his vice president.
Anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. It should come as no surprise that I will not be endorsing Donald Trump this year.
His defense secretary.
Do you think Trump can be trusted with the nation's secrets ever again?
No. I mean, it's just irresponsible action that places our service members at risk, places our nation's security at risk.
His national security advisor.
Donald Trump will cause a lot of damage. The only thing he cares about is Donald Trump.
And the nation's highest-ranking military officer.
We don't take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or a dictator. And we don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator.
Take it from the people who knew him best. Donald Trump is a danger to our troops and our democracy. We can't let him lead our country again.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Hi, my name is Freddie Ricks. I'm from Houston, Texas.
My name is Sharon Williams. I'm from Dallas, Texas.
Right now, I'm rolling with Roland Martin, unfiltered, uncut, unplugged, and undamn believable. You hear me?
It was black folks in Warren County, North Carolina, that actually created what is known as the Environmental Justice Movement. A couple of years ago, EPA Director Michael Regan was there, and the Black Star Network was there live streaming an event there where they talked about that history and discussed how they were reshaping the EPA to deal with the issue of environmental justice. Here's some of what Regan had to say in September 2022.
What an honor to be in the presence of so many giants of the environmental justice and civil rights movement, especially as we conclude a week-long commemoration of the birth of the environmental justice movement, whose roots are firmly planted right here in Warren, North Carolina. You know, as a proud son of North Carolina, I was born and raised, and I was just a child when the state decided to site the PCB landfill in the backyard of a predominantly black community. But I remember my parents discussing the heroism of the women and men who locked arms and laid down in front of those trucks carrying that laced dirt with PCBs. Women and men like Dolly Burwell, Ben Chavis, Reverend Bill Kearney, EPA's own Charles Lee joined protesters in solidarity. A Washington Post story at the time quoted Reverend Luther Brown, a pastor of the largest black congregation in the area, and he said, "We know why they picked us. It's because we're a poor county, poor politically, poor in health, poor in education, and because it's mostly black." But he also said nobody thought people like us would make a fuss. But boy, did they stir the hornet's nest. Because what this community lacked in political power, they made up for in courage. What they lacked in access to education, they made up for it in heart. What they lacked in terms of money in their pockets, they made up for it in faith, in hope, and perseverance. So not only did this community make a fuss, this community ignited a movement. And today, Warren County is synonymous with being the birthplace of environmental justice. You know, those protests 40 years ago were not only a catalyst for the environmental justice movement as we know of today, but it was a real awakening of the consciousness of this community that had been underserved and overburdened for so many years. It demonstrates the transformative potential that exists when people peacefully mobilize and come together in a common pursuit. As Ms. Dolly Burwell put it, African Americans determined that henceforth and forevermore will have some say in the government that was controlling our destiny. So despite losing the initial battle, these visionary women and men sparked something so much bigger, so much more powerful. And that's what we're here today to honor and to uplift. The reason we've reached this moment when environmental justice is front and center to President Biden's agenda and EPA's agenda, is because of the unrelenting advocacy of so many of you here today. It's because of faith leaders and civil rights leaders, the labor community, the environmental justice community, folks like Vernice Miller-Travis, Dr. Bob Bullard, Reverend Barber, Dr. Wright, Juan and Anna Paris, and young leaders like my good friend Lamisha Whittington, William Barber III, who are carrying this sacred mission forward. These are the people who have dedicated their lives to standing up and speaking out against racism and injustice and inequality.
Folks, if you want to see all of that, you can simply go to our Black Southern Network app or go to our YouTube channel. Mustafa, you were there that day. And again, black folks, again, knowing what our history, it was African Americans that launched this movement in North Carolina. North Carolina is a battleground state, and we still are seeing these issues. In Georgia, the local folks are suing the company. Well, they had that explosion just about a week ago that spewed all sorts of chemicals in the air there, impacting the health of folks living there.
Yeah, you know, it was a historic moment, and big shout out to Administrator Regan, you know, for the amazing job that he has done over the last almost 4 years now. It's really moved environmental justice, you know, leaps ahead of where it had been for, you know, decades of the work that was going on. And really, you know, focusing on something that I'd always shared with folks, that we have to move people from surviving to thriving. So we know that there's still a huge amount of work that has to happen. But for decades, people were having great ideas and were doing work, but they didn't have the resources to be able to match up with the incredible sets of, you know, ideas and innovation that they had. So now we finally have that. But we still got these battles that are going on. You know, in North Carolina, you still got the hog farms, the CAFO, certified animal feeding operations things. You know, we've got these lagoons that are filled with coal ash. When you go down to Georgia, we've still got some battles that are going on in relationship to nuclear and air pollution related issues. So the South is one of the main thrusts of the environmental justice movement. And we just got to give credit, of course, to the matriarchs, who often don't get as much attention, all these amazing women. And they mentioned Dolly Burrell, but there are so many others who are there on the front lines, who helped to frame out the agendas for how we would move forward and how we would hold federal and state and local and county governments accountable. So we've done some good work, but we still got a long way to go to make sure that everybody has clean air and clean water and clean land.
Tamara, earlier you talked about the quality of our food. I came across this video that I thought was pretty interesting, that hopefully people understand the impact of toxic chemicals and plastics in our food. Watch this.
That's right.
I could eat my arm right now.
I'm so hungry.
Yeah.
Hello. Would you like to hear our specials this evening?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For starters, we have a delectable bowl of creamy potato soup, seasoned with perfluorokill and polyfluorokill.
What's that?
Ooh, it's super tasty. They're called forever chemicals, and they're actually linked to hormone disorders and liver damage. And thanks to Trump and his 3 Supreme Court appointees, the portions are huge.
We'll pass.
No liver damage? Okay. Well, how about a nice pasta inspired by Project 2025?
Is that a movie?
We start with fresh fettuccine and alba truffle. And then we mix in a colorful variety of microplastics.
Pass.
Pass? Are you sure? It contains atrazine. That's a pesticide that Trump deregulated because lobbyists told him to do so. Oh, it will literally shrink your balls.
I need my balls.
Yeah, we want to have kids.
Oh, so y'all don't want toxic chemicals in your food?
No, of course not. Don't you have something that doesn't have
toxic chemicals?
Yeah.
Sure, silly. You could just vote for Kamala Harris. She's going to support the government agencies that actually want to keep your food clean.
Can we do that right now?
Oh, yes, you can vote early.
Thanks, we're going to go vote.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I think that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, gotta laugh to keep from crying. Project 2025, they have it right on the masthead that the focus is to reverse PFAS, which is what they were describing at that horrifying restaurant. They want to reverse the designation on the circular so that it's just fine. Like, people said it was bad, but don't worry about that. We're just going to reverse the bans based on a lot of political power. I think it's time to move past the point where we argue about what the bad thing is. The conversation is clear. Poison is on the menu. Our lives are being threatened. It is not a choice between the lesser of two evils. There's a lot of evil, and the question is who you want to fight it with.
Final comments, Mustafa.
I just leave it with my grandmother. You know, she says, when you know better, do better. We know better than to put back into office someone who has no regard for our community whatsoever, for our health, for our children, for the future. So if we know better, then the do better aspect of that is actually making sure that you have somebody who cares about our community and who's willing to also make the investments that are necessary for us to be able to move forward. And when we look at the two plans that are out there and the two candidates that are out there, the Harris-Walz has a plan to actually help us to be able to move from surviving to thriving. And unfortunately, the Trump folks have a plan that moves us from thriving to surviving. So the choice is yours. You can get with this or you can get with that.
Tamara, go ahead.
No, I just think it is, we always arrive here. Without us, neither of these plans can go forward. So it's not just about making a plan to vote. It's about making a plan to vote, making a plan to follow up on your vote, making sure you know who you vote for at every level of the ballot, and that each of those people are people who work for you the day you cast your vote. So I'm excited to see Black people show up, not just because climate change is in our face, because it's in our place.
Folks, final comment is very simple. Climate change is real. The environment is real. The impact on us, our children, is real as well. And guess what? There's only one candidate that actually has a plan. One has another plan, and that is to literally tear this thing to shreds and allow big business to do whatever they want. And so make your choice known. But for me, it's real simple. As Vice President Kamala Harris, if you care about this climate, if you care about this planet, then that's who you should be supporting. And isn't it interesting, all of these white conservative evangelicals always talking about God's planet, but they actually don't care about life in this regard. They love shouting they're pro-life. Why are they not pro-life when it comes to the economy? Why are they not pro-life when it comes to the environment, when it comes to climate? I'm just saying. I appreciate both of you being with us. Thanks a lot. Thanks for the folks at Climate Power as well.